Hello and welcome to livealittlehigher.com. This week we read Parashah Ki Tavo or Ki Tavo, and it's a beautiful parasha in which the Torah portion opens with the most beautiful mitzvah of Bikurim. So what is Bikurim? Bikurim is a mitzvah that used to be active in the times of the Beit HaMikdash when the temples were stood. And this was that the person that had a land and the land produced fruit, this person would bring to the temple, put in his basket the first fruits of the station, and he would put of the season, and he would put them there, and he would bring them to the temple and offer them to the Kohen Gadol. He would wave them on top of the altar, and then he would make a declaration. Where he said in this declaration that the very existence in Eretz Israel is dependent not on his own merits but on the grace of God. And so that God took the Jewish people out of Egypt and brought them to the land of Israel just because of his kindness. So Moshe Rabbeinu, there's a midrash where Moshe Rabbeinu, he had a divine inspiration. He could see the future, and he realized that the temples were not going to stand, that they were going to fall, and this would terminate the mitzvah of Bikurim, and this distressed Moshe Rabbeinu horribly, gave him a lot of distress. And what he did was that instead of the moment that this mitzvah was not going to be applicable in the temples, he instituted the 3 daily prayers that the Jewish people do every day, Shaharit, Minha, and Arvit, as an exchange for this mitzvah. So we see here that the mitzvah of Bikurim is considered to be most fundamental to Jewish life. It's really every Jew has to live with this concept of Bikurim every day of his life, which really is to be grateful, and not only grateful, to acknowledge to who to give thank you, and to acknowledge who is the one that gives us kindness. There's a concept of a hakaras hatov, where we have to recognize the good that has been done to us by God and by people around us. We always have to be very grateful and acknowledge for the rest of our lives any kind deed that anybody does for us. So this mitzvah is considered of great significance, and that's why it says in the Zohar that the whole world was created for the mitzvah of Bikurim. And so we see that the Zohar will be the key to understanding the fundamental role of this Bikurim in Jewish thought, and it declares that the function of the mitzvah of Bikurim is to emphasize to the individual, and indeed to make him declare, that his very existence in the land of Israel is dependent not on his own merits but on the grace of God. That if a person is living today in the land of Israel, it's not because he's meritorious, it's because Hashem gives him this kindness, and that he created us through kindness. So the intention of all the mitzvot is that we should believe in our God and concede to him that he created us. And this is so apropos that we're coming right now in the next 2 weeks to Rosh Hashanah, which is the day in which we coronate the king, is the day where we make Hashem king again. And in reality, we're also going to be standing there asking the God to be our king again. And so this is what it's so important, because if a person is not grateful for Hashem, then there's no purpose for the world to stand. Like when you're kind to someone and that person doesn't acknowledge your kindness, then why would you keep being kind to them? So this is why it's so important. So the bringing of the Bikurim encompass 3 main areas of our lives, which are thought, speech, and action. And the fruits were brought to the Beit HaMikdash, and they were waved on top of the altar. They were set down there, and these are actions. So there was an action. A person would bring this fruit, wave them, put them on the altar. That's connected to action. And then the owner of these fruits would declare this declaration that Hashem brought us out of Egypt to bring us to the land of Israel with kindness, and that is connected to the speech. And then he would prostrate himself and express this submission to God, that he was giving himself to God, and this is thought. So this explains why Bikurim is considered such a dear mitzvah in God's eyes, for the entire personality of a person is involved in the performance of one mitzvah. And these three categories of human activity also correspond to 3 levels of the soul. We have 5 levels of the soul. There's 3 levels that are inside of the body, which are Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. Then you have a Haya and you have a Yehida, which are external. But these 3 levels of the soul are connected to, the Ruach is connected to the instinctive level of the soul, the instinctive, the animalistic level of the soul, life. Ruach is the emotions, and the Nefesh, the Neshama is connected to the intellect. So we see thus the whole personality involved in realizing the sovereignty of God and admitting that He created us and the world in which we live. And this accurately reflects the entire purpose of man's creation. So we're in this world to acknowledge Hashem. God was, is, and will be. Before He created us, while we're in the world, if we cease to exist, He will continue to exist. But for Hashem to be a king, He needs substitutes like us to say, you are our king. And this is why this is such an important mitzvah. Because if we don't fulfill the mitzvah of Bikurim in a certain way, then nobody's acknowledging that God is a king. So with this we may return to the Midrash with which we began, and it is true that Moshe Rabbeinu saw this prophetic vision that the Beit HaMikdash was going to be destroyed, and that many of the mitzvahs that were done in the times of the temples were going to be defunct. But it was the future loss of this specific mitzvah of Bikurim that really distressed him. And because of this, he instituted a system of prayer where a Jew is mandated to pray 3 times a day, and this would compensate for the loss of this mitzvah. So it is evident that the overriding function of prayer is to subjugate one's personality and will to God, and by admitting one's reliance upon Him, we learn that the forefathers originally instituted the 3 prayers. So we know that Abraham Avinu, our first forefather, the first Jew, the first person that realized that there's one God and that God not only created the world but drives the world, and he instituted the prayer of the morning prayer that is called Shaharit. Isaac, his son, who was Gebura, discipline, he instituted the Minha prayer, which is the afternoon prayer. And Yaakov, who is the grandson of Abraham and the son of Isaac, instituted the Marif prayer, which is the night prayer. Abraham represents kindness, hesed, love and kindness, and also he represents the intellect, because he was the first person in the whole world that looked up at the skies and looked at the world and said, if there is a creation, there has to be a creator, and if there's a creator, then we have to give thanks to him. You know, if there's a creation, there's a creator, and if there's a creator that created the creation, we're mandated to be grateful to him and say thank you. So he was the first person to realize this, and he was the first to break away from idolatry, which was something that was very common in his days. Bereshit Rabbah says he had no father and no Rebbe, and because of this, God prepared his kidneys and made them his rabbis, and from there he learned the whole Torah. So his intense intellectual dedication prompted him to institute this prayer of Shaharit, which is the morning service. The word in Hebrew for morning is boker. Boker can also mean clarity, and we know that in the morning people have clear minds and there's more intellectual clarity. Isaac, on the other hand, is more disciplined, more justice, and he had a greater devotion than his father because of this. And not only was he able to sanctify his intellect, but he also sanctified his emotions. And he was prepared to offer himself as a sacrifice for God because of this. And we see that this prayer that he instituted, Minha, the prayer of Minha, corresponds to this soul, the emotions. We know that Minha is the hardest prayer of the day because people are still working, it's still daytime, people are busy, time is pressing, and sometimes people have to stop in the street and pray, or they have to stop a meeting and say, I'm sorry, I have to pray. And this is the most challenging one of all of them, but that's why you're like giving your heart to God at this time. So we say that indeed the word Minha finds its root in the word Menuha. Menuha means rest, it also means peace, it means peace of mind. And the state of rest intended is one experienced by the soul. We see clearly that the Nefesh corresponds to Isaac, who thus inaugurated the Minha prayer. And finally, we have Yaakov, who instituted the night prayer, which is called Mariv, and he achieved a still higher level, although we would think this would be the lower level because this one is connected to the Nefesh, which is the instinctive level of that soul. You would say instincts is the lowest, but here we see that no, it's the highest level because it included not only his intellect and his emotions, but it also included his body. And Yaakov was a perfect man that had a perfected body. He completely perfected himself. So Yaakov offered peace offerings, and this prayer of Mariv, it represents the peace offerings that were given in the temples to the Kohanim. And we see that these peace offerings were given with animals. You had to sacrifice animals. And only Yaakov, in distinction from Abraham and Isaac, is recorded as having brought these offerings. And for only a man who has reached physical as well as intellectual and emotional perfection may bring an offering from which he may eat from. And we know that this offering was left roasting in the altar the whole night. The next day they would eat it. So he instituted Mariv prayers. And we have seen that each of these 3 daily prayers service, which correspond to our avot, to our spiritual fathers, it provides a unique opportunity to subjugate oneself to the will of Hashem. Shaharit is for the intellect, Minha is for the emotions, and the Mariv is for the body, for the physical. Is to take all your physicality and offer it to God. And then we see that Moshe, in his great wisdom, saw in a prophecy that one day the people of Israel would no longer be able to offer in a temple, and this is why we have these 3 prayers every day. So I want to wish you a blessed week, and remember, live a little higher. Thank you.